Hare Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Jagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Giradhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Shama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaivam narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudidayat nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utamashloker bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. A reading from the chapter 7 of Srimad Bhagavatam, text number 1, chapter number 7. Is there an introduction to this chapter anywhere?
In the book itself, no?
I don't see it in the book. Oh, okay.
I think there's one in the small one,
Yeah, is there one there? I should probably read it.
I think
I think some of the earlier cantos didn't have introductions.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't see one on that's not.
it's not in this one.
chapter 7, page 356, 359 in this book. No, this is the general introduction to the whole book.
Oh.
Okay. Anyways, I'll just read the Devanagari from chapter 7, text 1. Brahma Uvacha. Lord Brahma said, Yatra, at the time, paren when, en paren, when, Udyataha, attempted, Shiti Tala, the planet Earth, Udaranaya, for the matter of lifting, Vivra, assumed, Krodim, pastimes, Tanum, form, Sakala, total, Yagyamayim, all-inclusive sacrifices, Anantaha, the unlimited, Antar, within the universe, Maha-Arnavai, the great Garbha ocean, Upagatam, having arrived at, Adi, the first, Daityam, demon, Tam, him, Dangstraya, by the tusk, Adrim, the flying mountains, Eva, like, Vajradaraha, the controller of the thunderbolts, Dadara, pierced. Translation: Lord Brahma said, when the unlimitedly powerful Lord assumed the form of a boar as a pastime, just to lift the planet Earth, which was drowned in the great ocean of the universe called the Garbhodaka, the first demon, Hiranyaksha, appeared, and the Lord pierced him with his tusk. And responsively, Lord Brahma said, when the unlimitedly powerful Lord assumed the form of a boar as a pastime, just to lift the planet Earth, which was drowned in the great ocean of the universe, called the Garbhodaka, the first demon, Hiranyaksha, appeared, and the Lord pierced him with his tusk. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since the beginning of creation, the demons and the demigods, or the Vaishnavas, are always the two classes of living beings to dominate the planets of the universe. Lord Brahma is the first demigod, and Hiranyaksha is the first demon in this universe. Only under certain conditions do the planets float as weightless balls in the air. And as soon as these conditions are disturbed, the planets may fall down in the Garbhodaka ocean, which covers half the universe. The other half is the spherical dome within which the innumerable planetary systems exist. The floating of the planets in the weightless air is due to the constitution of the globes, and the modernized drilling of the earth to exploit oil from within is a sort of disturbance by the modern demons and can result in a greatly harmful reaction to the floating condition of the earth. A similar disturbance was created formerly by the demons headed by Hiranyaksha, the great exploiter of the gold rush. And the earth was detached from its weightless condition and fell down into the Garbhodaka ocean. The Lord, as maintainer of the whole creation of the material world, therefore assumed the gigantic form of a boar with a proportionate snout and picked up the earth from within the water of Garbhodaka. Sri Jayadev Goswami, the great Vaishnava poet, sang as follows: Vasati darshane sikare dharani dava lagnya shashini kalanka kaleva namagya keshavadrita shukara rupa jaya jagadish hari. Jaya jagadish hari. Quote, O Keshava, O Supreme Lord, who have assumed the form of a boar, exclamation point. O Lord, exclamation point, the planet Earth rested on your tusks and appeared like the moon, engraved with spots, unquote. Such is the symptom of an incarnation of the Lord. The incarnation of the Lord is not the concocted idea of fanciful men who create an incarnation out of imagination. The incarnation of the Lord appears under certain extraordinary circumstances, like the above-mentioned occasions. And the incarnation performs a task which is not even imaginable by the tiny brain of mankind. The modern creators of many cheap incarnations may take note of the factual incarnation of God as the gigantic boar with a suitable snout to carry the planet Earth. When the Lord appeared to pick up the earth, the demon of the name Hiranyaksha tried to create a disturbance in the methodical functions of the Lord, and therefore he was killed by being pierced by the Lord's tusk. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the demon Hiranyaksha was killed by the hand of the Lord. Therefore, his version is that after being killed by the hand of the Lord, the demon was pierced by the tusk. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur confirms this version. Hukam karoti vachalam pangam longayate girim yatkari patarham bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. The verse again says, Lord Brahma said, when the unlimitedly powerful Lord assumed the form of a boar as a pastime, just to lift the planet Earth, which was drowned in the great ocean of the universe called Garbhodaka, the first demon, Hiranyaksha, appeared, and the Lord pierced him with his tusk. So whether he was killed by the hand of the Lord or the tusk of the Lord is a little bit unclear. But anyway, he was killed. And there was a great animosity towards Krishna when Hiranyakashipu was present on the earth, because he was aware that Hiranyaksha, his brother, was killed by the Lord. So it was a sort of a vendetta. He was very angry right from the beginning of his life, and wanted to somehow or other kill Vishnu. He was obsessed with Vishnu, and this is a form of Krishna consciousness which Prabhupada describes as not proper, but he was Krishna conscious in a way, and in his own way he got liberation into the Brahma Jyoti, because he was actually And it's actually Krishna conscious. And it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam that when Lord Nrsingadev appeared from the pillar, when he broke out, he sat on the throne of Hiranyakashipu. And he sat on the throne of Hiranyakashipu, unlike the other demons. He was very merciful to him. He sat on his throne because he was formerly one of the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha and had a special place in the heart of Vishnu. So when Vishnu appeared as Lord Nrsingadev, he sat on the throne of Hiranyakashipu just before he rent him asunder. And it's interesting that Prabhupada talks about a disturbance of the globes floating in the air. We don't think of them so much as floating, but we think of them as being held by gravity. And I think in Germany and in Tokyo they have trains that run on air. They have figured out a way to make the trains run on air instead of on the rails. It works like opposites of magnetics. If something is of the opposite pole, it repels rather than attracts. So these go very fast, these trains. In Japan it goes from Tokyo to Osaka, and I'm not sure where it goes in Germany, but it's a very fast train. It goes over 100 miles per hour, which is very fast for a train. This idea of the planets floating is kind of an unusual thing because we think that they're held by sort of a magnetic kind of gravitational force in their orbits. But Prabhupada says, no, they're actually floating. And the very fact that they're floating is hard to conceive of because they're very heavy. There are mountains and there are oceans and they weigh millions and billions of tons, but they're actually floating. And in 1973, I think it was, at Bhaktivedanta Manor, Prabhupada was speaking with a man who was an environmentalist. He was called Lord Queensberry, Marquis de Queensberry. And he was very concerned that this was in 1973, he was very concerned then that the world was running out of oil. And he heard Prabhupada say that when the earth runs out of oil, it's just like an airplane. If an airplane runs out of its fuel supply, its petrol, it's going to fall down. Isn't that correct? And the man had to agree that was correct. And he said, so similarly, when the earth runs out of oil, it will fall down. So it's very similar to what happened here. There was what Prabhupada calls, or what his translators call, a disturbance. And when that disturbance happened, the earth was drowned in the Garbhodaka ocean and had to be rescued. The only way it could be saved was by intervention from Krishna in the form of Lord Gaur, who picked up the earth in his tusks that were appropriately sized. And then Prabhupada talks in this purport about the fake incarnations. He calls them cheap incarnations. Many cheap incarnations may take note of the factual incarnation of God. So there's a difference. There's always people that are pretending they're God. And sometimes Prabhupada has said in some lectures or some books that impersonalism is sort of worship of oneself. Worship of oneself is like thinking that I am God and I can worship myself and be successful. Unfortunately, in certain parts of the world there are many Prabhupada calls pseudo-Vaishnava sects, 13 of them, the owls, the bowels, and the Shaki-Bekis, and various other they have names, and they masquerade as the real, genuine article. Sometimes the Shaki-Bekis are men dressed like women and sing with a baritone voice, but they're actually kind of an imposter. So right from the very beginning, Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Vinod were fighting against these pretenders, we might call them, or imposters. They wore neck beads and they had visited many holy places which they knew by name. And they knew a lot of Sanskrit verses, but again, they weren't the real thing. They were the imposters. And that goes on even today. Not so much in the West, but it does go to a degree on in the West. It does go on to a degree, but mainly in Prabhupada's land, there's a lot of pretension. And this happened. I mean, it's been going on for hundreds of years. But Lord Chaitanya also warned against there's a against imposters. There's a type of charcoal briquette. I purchased one, a box called Three Kings. You know about this. And there's a card that comes with it saying, "Beware of imitations." And it made me think of all these pseudo sects. They're imitations. Beware of imitations! Exclamation point! It said, and these happen to be very good products of the material world. So there's many, and the one that's probably talked about a lot and mentioned in various shastras, including the Chaitamrita, is Vishikashena, who some of you might know the incident of him. He was a person who considered himself Vishnu, and he exploited many people, especially ladies, women, and people thought he was the real thing, that he was genuine. He was like a personality cultist, you might say. But and some people could understand that he was kind of faking it, and he was an imposter. And some of the people that were very aware of the fact that he was faking it were the British rulers of India. And they summoned Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was then a magistrate and very, very learned person and very, very familiar with the language of that land, to do something to arrest this guy because he was an impostor. So he approached him with a number of constables and said, "I'm going to arrest you because you're a fraud." And this Vishikashena became very angry, and he cursed Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his whole family. And as a result of this curse, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his whole family contracted a disease. They got high temperature. They were about to die. He had a very powerful kind of shakti, or power to make these curses come real. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur's wife, as the story goes, was telling him to let this guy just be. Let him do what he has to do, his nefarious activities, because we're all going to die. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, being very courageous, rejected that and went back to arrest this man. And actually he was arrested and taken into prison. And then there was a court trial. And in the court trial, he was defending himself, I suppose. And so one of the people in the gallery, who was British, realized that the power of this yogi, of this Vishikashena, was in his hair. He had long hair. And that somehow or other was where his power rested. So this man jumped, according to one account, this Englishman jumped on him, got on his back, and cut his hair. And the story is that Vishikashena lost his shakti, his power, and that he departed. He died in jail like hours later because he was divested of his yogic power. So it's a very interesting story. There's a lot more detail that some of the Puranas go into than I told. But anyway, it shows the courage of a Vaishnava like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who was willing to undergo severe sickness and fever in order to do the right thing, in order to expose the pretender. Sometimes it is said that English is the language of horses, German is the language of dogs, and French is the language of women. Now, I don't mean to say that everyone who's listening to this lecture is a horse, including the speaker. And I don't mean to say that everyone who speaks only French is female, and I don't mean to say that everyone who speaks only German or understands only German is a dog. Nevertheless, there's wisdom to this saying, and I think this was either said by or told to Srila Prabhupada, and he kind of nodded affirmatively that this was the case, that English is the language of horses, German is the language of dogs, and French is the language of women. I don't know. It's a kind of like food for thought. It's a bit of an aphorism, but I don't know where it exactly came from. But it's part of the material world. I want to read. I was reading part of the. I read the whole Vyasa Puja 2021 offerings, and one of the initial ones was written by Anuttama Prabhu, and in it I'm going to read part of what he wrote. He said, "As time passes by and your direct disciples," he was referring to Prabhupada, the respected elders of the Hare Krishna movement, pass on, I fear that your association, your preeminent position, your mood and teachings may be minimized or even forgotten. Of course, in one sense, that can never happen. Your murti will always sit in our temples. Your pranama prayers will always be chanted to begin our kirtans. Your books will always be published. But my fear, Prabhupada, is that the worship of your sacred form may become ritual. Chanting your pranam prayers, just thoughtless repetition, your books read less and less by ISKCON aspirants who are instead attracted by the words of contemporary charismatic preachers. And in a way, this little fear or excerpt of his offering is kind of what's going on to a certain extent, even today, where people develop a what sometimes is translated as shadow attachment for a particular person or a speaker or a person who has a high office in ISKCON, and it becomes sort of like a personality cult. And it's happened in the remote past of ISKCON. I'm talking about what happened 40 or 50 years ago. This happened, and when the leader, so to speak, either fell down or departed some way or other, either died, or usually it was a dance with Maya, we can call it, a sort of a fall down. Like if it was a man, he fell in love with one of his disciples or something like that and had a consummated relationship. But what happened was that when this occurred, which is an unfortunate occurrence, many of the disciples, they departed from the movement. They left the movement. I mean, not that they died, but they just stopped being on the front line of preaching and went into the material world, so to speak. This, unfortunate, is a bit of the dark history of ISKCON, but it's happened. And another English saying is that all's fair in love and war. All's fair in love and war. And to illustrate this, Prabhupada was telling a story. This is an actual story that he told in a lecture. I think it was in Vrindavan. I'm not sure where it was. But when he was younger, he was a proprietor of a pharmacy. And one of his customers used to tell war stories, especially from World War I. And one of the stories was that a group of refugees came to the French commander named Commander Foch. And they were from Belgium, mostly women and children, and there was quite a large number of them. I don't know how many, but a number. And they were sort of, you might call them allies in World War I with the French. And when Commander Foch learned of this, he became very disturbed, very angry. And he said, well, what can I do with all these people? I don't have a place to put them. And then, as the story was told to Prabhupada, all these people were lined up and killed by guns. They were assassinated. So the idea is that everything is fair in love and war. They wanted to win the war. So in order to do that, they assassinated their own allies. That was the story that what Prabhupada heard from this. I think his name was Mr. McPherson, who was one of his customers. They were telling war stories, and that was one of the war stories that came about. So the material world is just full of treachery, as it is said, padam padam yad vi padam natesham. There's a danger at every step, and when there's warfare, all the international so-called laws are cast aside. Even the Red Cross has its own militant group, and the United Nations has battle tanks with UN written on them. So these are supposedly the peacekeeping organizations of international warfare, but according to what Prabhupada said, there's no peace anywhere. When there's war, there's attacks in the evening, which is against the Kshatriya code. They fight at night. They use bombs. They use everything they can do. So there's no sort of humane activity anywhere. When it's war, it's war. You either win or lose. And if you want to win, you have to sort of resort to all kinds of tactics that are unnecessarily cruel. But that's what war is. It's an unfortunate thing in the material world. Not only in the material world, but even in the spiritual world, there's always disputes between the demons and the demigods. It's just a difference between personalities. There's always the asuras and the asuras and the suras. The suras are the demigods, and there's a very large statuary. Some of you have probably seen it in the Bangkok airport of the demons having a tug of war with the demigods, and it's a huge thing. It must be about 100 meters long or something like that. Not 100 meters, but maybe 50 meters long. And they're tugging on this. It's actually a pastime that's narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The medium is Vasuki, who's a very large serpent, and the mountain of Mandao mountain is being churned. And this thing has been recently installed. I mean, I think 5 or 6 years ago, if you can call that recent, in the Bangkok airport. And it's part of the Vedic culture. The actual pastime is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's another. I just want to read one other piece that was from this book. It was an offering by the late Bhakti Swami, and here's what he wrote. Not him, but his disciples in Ujjain. Ujjain is a temple that he started, and most of the people in that temple are his disciples. So this is what they wrote. Srila Prabhupada, we receive your divine mercy through your dear disciple, His Holiness Bhakti Swami. His physical absence has severely affected us, and we depend on the divine instructions he left behind for us to follow. He always emphasized the 3 main instructions he received from your divine grace. And these are the instructions. 1, no matter what happens, never leave ISKCON. 2, the GBC is the ultimate managing authority of ISKCON. And 3, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate with one another. The last one, about cooperation, is a little bit controversial because I couldn't find it anywhere in the Veda base about Prabhupada saying that you have to cooperate with one another and that will please me and that's how the movement is going to go on. But after I dug more and more deeply, I found some of his disciples were saying that back to him as he said it, and he agreed. So apparently that was an important issue for Prabhupada, that the movement would go on if people would cooperate. He said, the exact quote is, your love for me will be determined by how well you cooperate together after I leave. And then I wanted to narrate one other story, but I think we won't have time, and we'll leave it till next time. It has to do with one devotee encountering someone on an airplane about Prabhupada's books, but we'll leave it until next time. So are there any comments or questions about this verse or anything that that comes to your mind, or anything that I said? Anyone? Yes? No? Yes?
So, I just want to pronounce on this pastime, it doesn't mention in the Bhagavatam. It would assume the earth wasn't inhabited at that particular time.
Well, the things I read didn't say anything about inhabitation. It just said the word drowned was used, and we usually use that word in relation to human beings. But it says here that the earth was drowned. But I mean, if there's a lot of water, when there are people around, it's going to be curtains. Because, I mean, we can swim, but not across the ocean, or not across a wide river. So I don't know that, if it was meant to have been inhabited or not. Okay, anything else?
In the translation of the words, there's a word there, Arjun. It's the flying mountains. But there's no mention of it in the translation.
So I don't. What are you asking? Something?
Yeah. In the word. There's one word in Sanskrit there, which is Arjun, which means the flying mountains. But then there's no mention of that word in the translation.
Just in the purport. Where?
In the word for word.
Oh,
It's it's in the last line. Samstraya Adrim. And then it's not mentioned in the translation. And I'm curious why that would do.
where is it in the word for word?
It's near the end. Adrim.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong verse. Adrim, the flying mountains. It's plural, and it's not in the translation.
Yeah, I'm just curious why.
Well, I don't know anything about why things were translated or edited and why they picked certain words, so I actually don't know why it says flying mountains. But I think we do have to assume that there are such things. I mean, whoever was translating Adrichim must have heard of flying mountains, must think that they really exist. I mean, we hear of elephants that can move from one planet to another, or birds that can go from one planet to another. And obviously, they're not. And there's a snake that has wings. If a snake can fly, why can't a mountain fly? I don't know. Snake bird, the one that bit Parikit to death, to cause him to die. Anyway, I don't know the answer. So, anything else? Okay, I think we'll end there. Hare Krishna.